I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're gonna pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Welcome to the main event. You're joining Star Wars Station for our very first Lightsaber Fight Night. Today, we're going to be talking about all of the greatest lightsaber fights in Star Wars history. This discussion, we've been talking about doing an episode like this for a while, but the ball was really pushed downhill with Leslie Headland's claim that the Acolyte was going to outdo the prequel lightsaber fights. And we had talked about this about 2 episodes ago in our Acolyte finale, what we thought of the lightsaber fights and how we really needed to sit down and rank them. And so that's what we're doing this week. I hope a lot of people are going to be really enjoying this episode. I know a lot of people, that's like their main Star Wars bread and butter is lightsaber fights. Everybody's got their thing, whether it's the dog fights, it's the Force, it's the lightsaber fights, it's the underworld stuff. Well, a lot of people have it for the saber fights. So we're going to sit down and we're going to evaluate the claim that the Acolyte held up to the prequel saber fights, and we're just going to rank the fights in general. We want to see if those fights really stack up, and we want to just talk about the most dynamic fights of all time. As is popular on the internet today, we are going to be doing a draft of lightsaber fights. Not a tier list because, you know, like 90% of them are still going to go in the A and S tier. And so we're going to sit here and draft the fights. We're going to take turns choosing fights. Then you, our listeners and viewers, you guys can comment. You can DM us who you think had the stronger list, because we're really going to be curious on who you think had the stronger lightsaber fight list. For those of you new to the station, my name is Carter, your host for all things Star Wars Station, and I am joined by my longtime co-host, the fencing Faline himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, and it's also, we're recording this episode while the Olympics is going on. There's some fencing stuff going on. There's a funny clip of a guy doing a bunny hop and winning a match. Straight out of a video game. It's hilarious. So it's real on point. It's real timely that we're having this episode during this thing. But I'm pumped. You know, there's a lot of lightsaber fights.
There's a lot. To prepare for this.
It's going to be hard to pick out.
To prepare for this, I wrote down in our notes every live-action lightsaber fight in chronological order. And then I wrote down many of the animated fights that I think were noteworthy that we may want to pick. I mean, with the Clone Wars, you can't write down every lightsaber fight. That's dozens and dozens of lightsaber fights that aren't going to make the top 6 for either of us. It's still fun, but it's not going to make the top 6.
Yeah.
I say top 6 because we've got some draft rules for this. So we're going to go through the rules real quick, give everybody the ground rules. So the first one is that there's 6 lightsaber fights each. So we're going to have a total of 12. We're limited to 2 animated fights because that's just a totally different medium. Like having a physical actor have a lightsaber duel is totally different than manipulating a 3D character on a screen.
Yeah, they're not limited by physics.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're going to take it to just 2 animated fights, and we're going to do it snake draft style. So we're going to, the first person will pick, then the second person will get 2 picks in a row. Then the first person will get 2 picks in a row. And so it'll just snake back and forth like that to make it more fair, to make it just not a back and forth, because then there's a real clear first person advantage if you don't do a snake draft. And finally, these are not like the technical best lightsaber fights.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I'm going off of feels.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have nostalgia mixed in there. We're going to have enjoyment mixed in there. Like, it's just, we're not going, we don't fence. We don't know how to rate a sword fight. And so we're not going to sit here and be like, well, this one had a lot more of this element than the other. We're just talking about what we think basically is the coolest. Like, it's
results, character reveals, stuff like that.
Exactly. And so I already covered this. This was sparked off of the Acolyte, and so we're going to be hopping right into this lightsaber fight draft, and we're going to be talking about our picks as we go through them. I'm sure we're going to be stealing picks from each other, some that we were really hoping to have, so we're going to have some hot takes. And then at the very end, we've got a little honorable mentions section, because, again, there's more than a dozen good lightsaber fights, and we want to mention them and talk about them. So we're going to flip a coin. Actually, we're going to flip a bottle cap, because I didn't bring a coin, but we do have a beer right here. So we're going to flip a bottle cap to see who gets to go first. So, Colin, do you want logo or not logo?
Logo.
All right, there it goes. And it is not logo.
There you go, Carter.
All right, so that means that I'm first. I think that's the disadvantage in the snake draft. I do think, because there's a lot of strong
contenders. You
better
pick a good one first.
Oh, I'm going to pick one that you're going to hate that I picked, because you're going to want it. I mean,
I know.
Off rip, everybody's pick.
Everybody's pick.
Duel of the Fates.
Oh, okay.
All right, no, I think Duel of the Fates. I think that Duel of the Fates has the best choreography of any lightsaber fight.
Not my number one.
So your number one, then I know what your number one is, but I'll let you reveal it. Because there are basically only those two.
Yeah.
But Duel of the Fates, I think, has the right choreography down. It's a two-person fight. First time. Majorly consequential. The title, if no one's ever gone and listened to what Dave Filoni has to say about the significance of Duel of the Fates' title and what it means for Anakin and his destiny, you really need to go check that out, because Dave has a really good interview that he did for the 3rd season of the Clone Wars discussing that.
Very cool.
Surrounding the Mortis arc. So go check that interview out, and it's the first double-bladed lightsaber. I don't know if I already said that. We get to see Darth Maul in action for, before the Clone Wars, what was the only time, basically. I did not include his and Qui-Gon's little clash in Tatooine.
Yeah,
on here
I wouldn't call that a fight. That's a rub up against.
Yeah, exactly. And so we get to see Maul in action. We get all this great choreography. As you said, it's exceptionally consequential. The first double-bladed lightsaber. So I think Duel of the Fates is a firm first pick.
Oh, yeah. It's a good first pick for you, for sure.
All right, so what is your first pick?
My first pick is Luke and Vader on Bespin.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good one.
So
yeah.
It's mainly because of the cultural zeitgeist. And it's such a markedly impactful lightsaber fight that people get it wrong. It's got the Mandela effect on it. Luke, I am your father is what everybody says, but in reality, what it's always been is, no, I am your father.
Right.
And you talk about consequential fights. There's so much. I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it really is, to me. I mean, you talk about lack of technical ability and all this other stuff compared to what we have today, what happened in the sequels. I mean, but we got it was, at the time, it was the pinnacle coming off of A New Hope, the second movie, objects being thrown around, the big reveal at the end was such a big cultural impact thing, and it's still a cultural impact today.
Yeah, well, it's fair to say, the biggest twist in all of Hollywood, really, forever. I mean, it's just, there's pretty much never going to be able to top, Vader telling Luke that he's his father.
Yeah.
So your first pick's Bespin Duel. Think that's a wonderful first pick. What's your second pick?
Second pick, we're going through the list here, and it's hard to pick. There's so many different things. For me, those two are kind of obvious. If I had to pick a number 2, it would be Duel of Fates, maybe. But we can't do that, and I'm perfectly okay with these rules. So I don't see it on your list here. I want to say Sidious versus what's his name, Mace Windu.
Oh yeah, I did not include that one. That one's a great one. That one just out of my memory.
And so this is, again, if I were able to sit here and process all of these little fights and pick out this or that and what I want to do, it could be some other stuff. But this one is another hyper consequential fight in universe. The Dark Lord revealed. It's the culmination of the Sith's ascendancy that has been desired by them for 1,000 years. And so it's also this hilariously memeable fight. I've seen all kinds of TikToks and other videos about how Sidious moves and twirls and does all this stuff.
Right.
And the Jedi Masters or Grandmasters that in previous films have been just doing all this cool stuff get murked right off the bat.
Right.
And it's it's the end of Mace Windu, and it's such an impactful fight. Unlimited power. It's quotable. It's that big reveal. It's the creation of Darth Vader. What cemented that? That was the Rubicon cross from Anakin to Darth, was hacking Mace Windu's arm off.
Yeah, so is that what... So many people argue about when Anakin became Vader, and I think it clearly is that moment.
I mean, we can have a debate about on it. That's fine.
Look, there are other arguments to be made, but I think that is the strongest argument. Is when he betrays the Jedi Order and when he saves Palpatine is when he becomes Vader.
Yeah, fall of the dark side, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Mace Windu he's the guy. He's the Jedi guy. The top one, tip of the top. Not really. It's a council, but as far as like status, and he betrayed all of the Jedi with that lightsaber stroke.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Massive
all his
consequence.
Previous principles, and all. But it's all these other stuff. For a quick analogy off the top of my head, Anakin's been walking down that dark side path for years, with Palpatine paving the way the whole time, and that arm chop was opening the door and being welcomed into that Sith fold.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
So, that's my next one.
Mm-hmm. So, my next one, we're both going to have in our top two spots a prequel and an original trilogy, because my next one is Death Star 2. Vader versus Luke on Death Star 2. You get, in the original trilogy, the most heavily choreographed fight. You get the first lightsaber throw on screen. You get some hopping around and jumping around that's the precursor to the prequel fights that we see. You get to see the iconic green and red cross that we had never seen before on screen. That's the first time you get to see that. And obviously the emotional impact. The entire end of that with Luke angrily hammering Vader down, chop his arm off, and, stay his hand before executing his father, and seeing the robot hand and just knowing that they have more in common, and Luke ultimately being the Jedi in the situation and ultimately coming around to forgiving his father. And so I think it's the message of Star Wars. I think that it is the core of Star Wars, is that duel right there. Is the end of the original trilogy is the lesson you're supposed to take from this entire franchise. And so I think the duel on Death Star 2 has got to be my number 2 spot.
Yeah, perfect pick. There's so much to that. I think you hit the nail on the head. And, in the context of Star Wars that's being made today, like if this was a TV show, I wonder how they would have done that.
Yeah,
I'm skeptical it would have turned out the same way.
I don't think it would have. And, you have this is a little bit extended on that fight, but you get to see Force lightning for the first time. You get to see Palpatine's fall.
Yeah.
You get to see all of that included in that. That's kind of built into there.
Yeah. And just in the head, going back, I really wish I was a small child, I think, when that came out. And I wouldn't have even been cognizant, but I wish I could go back and listen in on some of the conversations people were having back then about what they thought, like a deep dive, high-minded talk about all the conversations with that. What all Force stuff did they think was going on back then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it was the Wild West of the Force back then. Like it wasn't near as put out there as it is now.
Yeah, there wasn't like these endless forums you could scroll,
right,
where just people belching their opinions out there.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
And you look at that fight, and I can think off the top of my head of 4 of some of the most iconic screen grabs from all of Star Wars are from that fight alone.
Yeah.
The red and the green cross in front of Palpatine's face, Luke being electrocuted, Luke's crazed look right before he strikes down Vader, and Vader holding Palpatine over his head. Yeah, like it's cool. Just there's so many super iconic shots just from that one little duel.
Yeah, very cool.
So my next pick, I'm gonna have to go back to the prequels and grab this one, because this is also just trying to do like what are the best.
Right.
The duel on Mustafar. You gotta take Obi-Wan versus Anakin.
That was gonna be my next one.
Yeah. For the dialogue alone. You have to take.
I have the high ground, Anakin.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't try
you were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. I hate you. Seeing Anakin's body get burnt up. And the choreography. That's, 2 blue lightsabers clashing on screen for such an extended fight, and there's so much emotion in their swings. They're not holding back at all. They're very ready to kill each other. You see the fight go with lightsabers, and then they have force powers involved. There's just a lot going on in that fight. And then finally, we've actually talked about this a lot because of the Acolyte. You had Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen fighting so rapidly that they had to slow that fight down to make sure that the frames would catch all of the lightsaber moves. And so that's just an iconic piece of swordplay right there. I mean, that's really impressive stuff. And obviously we have Nick Gillard to thank for that. We also have Nick Gillard to thank for the Duel of the Fates. Probably the Duel in the Chancellor's Office as well. I think he choreographed all of the prequels. And that guy's just a preeminent swordmaster. And so getting to see all of those prequel fights, there's a reason that those were so good, and that's because they had somebody dedicated to that goal on set. And so the Duel on Mustafar is my third pick.
Yep. So I get 2 picks next?
Yeah, you get 2 picks. To recap right now, Colin's list is the Bespin Duel and the Duel in the Chancellor's Office. Mine is the Duel of the Fates, Duel on Death Star 2, and Duel on Mustafar.
Yeah. You got the better list so far.
We'll see.
I mean, we're having a great time.
Yeah,
Man. This is really good. Okay, I'm going to switch over to animated, and I hope I'm stealing with this one from you on a level, just from.
I'm sure you are. If you say that, I'm sure you know what it is. And I wanted to pick that one because I wanted it in my list because that's like one of my favorite moments in all Star Wars.
Oh my gosh, it has to be Obi-Wan versus Maul.
Yes, yeah, that is stealing it from me for sure. Obi-Wan versus Maul in Rebels. That's in Rebels. Yeah, because there's a few Obi-Wan versus Mauls.
And to be clear, it's not Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul. He's not Darth at this point. He still has dark purpose, but he's not part of the Sith at this point, and you can only be part of the Sith to have a Darth title. But gosh, this is the shortest lightsaber duel or fight. Would you say?
Oh yeah.
I mean, with any consequence, like we said, we kind of joked, I think, a little bit about Qui-Gon and Maul on Tatooine and that brief encounter they had. But that was just an escape.
Right.
This was an actual fight. And, this was a definite ending for one character, for Maul, and it's just so emotional, and it's the completion of this character. We get for Maul outside of a childhood, which is kind of doesn't matter. We have a complete totality of a picture of this character and his motivations from. What his intended beginning was as a Sith apprentice under Darth Sidious to this ending as someone trying to, we saw a whole life's picture, this criminal empire, and to this final seeking of revenge that failed on Tatooine. And so it was also, in a sense, an ending, and I'm making this up, I kind of doubt I'm right, but it's a sense of an ending for Obi-Wan, chronologically for Obi-Wan, this was like the end of that chapter of all this Clone Wars nonsense and stuff that this duel he had when he was a child, ending when he's an old man on Tatooine. Right. And then all that's left for Obi-Wan at that point is the just my mind melted on this word, the confrontation with Darth Vader on Death Star 1. And so and that is a lightsaber fight, but it's not much of one. Right.
Yeah. That one's tough to put on a list. Yeah. I mean, it's the first one, but
there's intent there. Obi-Wan wasn't it was defensive only. He had a different purpose there instead of trying to get out with his life intact. Right. And so that's not really a fight that you can even say is a thing. But this one with this thing that Obi-Wan doing the pose like he does from back in the Clone Wars, and this finality of that confrontation between him and Maul is just so over the top. Cool.
Right. And one of the things that I like, obviously you stole that one from me, that's part of it. And so I love that moment in Rebels. It's one of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars, and one of the things that I like the best about it is Maul comes with all of this bitterness, all of this hatred, and all of this anger. It's his only purpose in life is to find Obi-Wan and kill him now. That's it. Maul has no goals. The criminal enterprise is done. Being a Sith Lord's done. All of that's gone. And he comes, fights Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan wins, and then all Obi-Wan has for him is compassion. He holds Maul, cradles him in the exact same way he cradles Qui-Gon, in the exact same way he cradled Satine, and the unlimited amount of compassion that Obi-Wan has for Maul in that moment is unparalleled. And then you get to have Maul get the big reveal that Luke exists and that Luke is going to save. And Maul takes the clear dark side thought process with that, in that he will avenge us. That Maul and Obi-Wan have a sense of camaraderie together because they were both betrayed by Sidious. They were both betrayed by the Sith. The Sith took over and threw both of them to the side. And so Maul, despite his hatred for Kenobi, does recognize that they have that little bit of common camaraderie. And so him seeing Luke and saying that is a huge deal. I love that fight. I love that pick. I think that makes your list exceptionally strong.
Yeah, it does. So I got another pick.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, I'm having trouble picking. There's a lot of blurred, the gray lines here.
Yeah, you start to get rid of the very top of the top. Like Duel of the Fates, Bespin, the Duel on Mustafar, like those are taken now. So you start to really get to hold two things up that are nearly the same color and level of quality.
Exactly right. So what I'm going to pick here is Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda versus Dooku.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good
Geonosis.
one. Mm-hmm.
So this one, it culminates off of this really awesome sequence, the battle for Geonosis. You know, Anakin is with Padme going to this factory. There's this giant war in the Colosseum. Jango gets hacked to pieces by Mace Windu. And so this fight has so much buttressing on it, buttressing it up that is like the cherry on top of the sundae of Anakin and Obi-Wan, and Anakin being the defiant little turd, thinking that he could just go roll this guy, and it's not the case. And so, you know, you're watching this, you kind of you know what's going to happen, right? But it's so impactful because it's this, like, it's a one of the other Rubicons for Anakin, and seeing him face his, you know, run into a brick wall, for lack of a better term, right? And it gets the defining arm chop off, and then it's the first reveal of Yoda using a lightsaber, and not you know, I kind of, you know, overanalyzing a little bit. It felt like he was, you know, because Dooku is Yoda's apprentice. Right. I think Yoda was kind of pulling his punches a tad, you know, being Spider-Man almost, because if he wanted to, he could just end a fight pretty easily. But he had to worry about Obi and Annie over here. He wants to...
Well, and that's ultimately Dooku is on the ropes, and that's how he gets him, is he tries to kill Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Yoda has to save them.
Yeah, and so I think especially from Yoda's perspective, he's not going to want to just end a fight, especially if like, what if Yoda had the foreknowledge, and he didn't, I'm not saying he did, but like we do, that if, you know, Yoda had stopped Count Dooku, it would have saved billions of lives, or hundreds of millions of lives maybe, in all the wars that was about to take place.
Right.
But Yoda's this such a compassionate character and knows this guy on such a personal level that he's not going to just piece him apart. So, you know, there's a lot to that fight that I don't think, you know, a lot of people pan that movie, but for me, it's got an elevated spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the fight itself, like you said, we get to see Yoda come in for the first time with this super unique fighting style. The dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan and the Padawan-Master relationship there on full display. Anakin's hubris on full display in that fight. And that's ultimately what loses those Jedi the fight. And we get Anakin losing his hand, and all of these very important and impactful moments in that fight. So, yeah, I think that's a great pick. I think that's a wonderful pick. So I'll dip into animation now for my first one, my first of two animation grabs, and I'm between a few animated fights right here. But I think the animated fight that has to take the cake for me has got to be Ahsoka versus Vader in Rebels.
That's going to be my next pick. Oh, dang it.
Ahsoka versus Vader in Rebels is just the culmination of Ahsoka's Padawanship to Anakin, Padawanship to Vader. It showcases Vader's evil. It showcases his willingness to be ruthless and to come after Ahsoka. We get a lot of very important Rebels moments. Obviously, the way it relates to the World Between Worlds is very important. All the build-up in those 2 episodes is just awesome. Like, those are some of the best Rebels episodes. Ezra, we get him involved. We get Ezra involved with Vader for just a moment. And we see Ahsoka pushing him away. And so the main thing that I draw from this fight, though, that I think is the most quality, is something that a lot of people talk about. The way that this fight rhymes with the fight from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, where Ahsoka's able to bust off half of Vader's mask, and we see a side of Anakin's face. And then in Kenobi, we see the other side of that face, but that neither of those two could pull Anakin from the brink and to bring him back. Only Luke could remove the mask completely. I really like how those 2 fights rhyme together and do that. And I really like to see the near humanity come out in Vader and for him to stuff it down and for that hatred to exist. Because despite the fact that he did love Ahsoka and he did love Obi-Wan, he didn't love anybody as much as Padme until Luke came around. And so the message from that fight, that Vader is still evil and he is willing to kill his former Padawan, was really impactful. So I think that pick is my number 4 pick for sure.
Yeah, great pick. I thought you said more about it than I could have. Did that fight end in a cliffhanger on the TV show? I don't remember.
Originally, yeah. I mean, Vader walks away, but you think Ahsoka's dead.
Yeah, we don't know anything about Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But
as viewers, we're like confident that she's dead. I mean, the line from Disney is that she's dead, and then obviously the World Between Worlds thing happens.
Yeah. What the coolest thing, one of the coolest scenes from the start of that fight was Vader on top of his TIE Advance.
Yeah.
Descending down to that Sith temple.
Yes.
That is such a over-the-top cool scene.
Yeah, that one is. So I'm going to take a foray into the sequels now, because this fight, this is probably the most controversial pick I could make of any fight at all, because there's some people that viscerally dislike this fight. And to those people, I say, you're a big nerd, because you care too much about the swordplay thing. Rey and Kylo versus the Praetorian Guards is just so
It's
raw.
fun.
It is off the hook cool. It is not a mystery what my least favorite Star Wars movie is to the listeners of this podcast. My least favorite Star Wars movie is The Last Jedi. Again, I hate no Star Wars movies. That one is my least favorite. There's not very many moments in that movie where I'm like, I'm really, really into this. That moment is one. And that moment, specifically in the movie theater, for me, was just off the chain cool, because you get some really dynamic choreography. You get a lot of really good intermingling between Rey and Kylo's characters and their fighting style and the way they complement each other. And I am aware that, a lightsaber exists where it shouldn't, or, there's this knife here that just seems to appear. I don't care, because lightsaber fights on screen are not designed to be broken down frame by frame and viewed on your laptop so you can say, this is wrong. They are viewed for enjoyment. They're viewed for entertainment, and they exist for a narrative reason. And so this fight does narratively exactly what it's supposed to, where it unites Kylo and Rey, puts the dyad kind of front and center, and it allows Rey to have this false hope that Kylo has turned to the light. And it gives the audience a sense of false hope that Kylo has turned to the light. I mean, you think that's the case. He kills Snoke, you're like, he's wielding the blue lightsaber for a second. He is now on the light side. He is a good guy. And you learn at the end of that fight that he's not. It breaks Rey's heart, and then you get this giant Skywalker saber explosion. And so all of that, I think, is really, really good, and I think that it ties up one of the best moments in that movie that sets up my favorite sequel movie, which is The Rise of Skywalker. I think this scene does a ton of legwork for The Rise of Skywalker. And so without this scene, that movie wouldn't be as good as I think it is. And so I really, really like Rey and Kylo versus the Praetorian Guards. And I'll also admit, slight cheating. There's a couple fights on this list that I said are kind of cheating. That one, Mando versus Gideon, because one of them's using a spear, and Ahsoka versus Elsbeth, because one of them's using a spear. They're on the list. I think that they could be claimed, but I think those three, because they're not against another lightsaber. Yeah. So anyway, that's my fifth pick.
Yeah, that's a good pick. there's a lot to that fight. The first thing that comes to my mind when I'm thinking about that is the goriness of it. I'm struggling to think, and I might be wrong, as far as movies goes, we had Luke's hand be chopped off and some other things here and there, but like lightsaber blades were going through faces in that.
Yes. Yeah, they were.
And, it just preceded Snoke being cut in half. I don't know if we'd ever seen stuff like that up until this point.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
On the big screen.
We'd had hands.
There's an infamous
and
scene.
Anakin, Anakin getting on Mustafar, that one's a little different, but it happened so quickly, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah. And it's not like this one right after another just being...
Right. They focus on that lightsaber straight through the eye on that one. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And not to say that that's good or bad. I just remark on the fact that exists and that it happened. I kind of like gratuitous violence in a sense, but
it paved the way for the Acolyte. We wouldn't have gotten a bunch of what we got in the Acolyte without those scenes happening.
And a lot of stuff like in Obi-Wan with the stormtrooper being
yes, that's true. That's true.
And I don't know, in time when it happened, but there's a scene in Rebels where the Grand Inquisitor, it's in the first season. He cuts it's implied, it doesn't show it expressly, but he lops a couple of Imperial officers' heads off.
Yeah, that would have been before the sequels, but I get your point. There's just this, after Disney bought the company, there is a little bit of a shift, and this is just kind of a shift culturally in the world, in that gratuitous violence is more acceptable for a younger audience a little bit. And so that shift was also turned by Disney. They went along with that shift, and it kind of built up to that moment in The Last Jedi where you have more gratuitous violence than before.
And the argument for that otherwise is like lightsabers should be doing that all the time. In video games, they're hyper conservative about what lightsabers can do. There's very few video games where, you can't buy if you create a stormtrooper in The Force Awakens or in the Force Unleashed. Well, Force Unleashed, but I'm talking about the later ones that came out.
Survivor and Fallen Order.
You can hack limbs off and maybe a head, I don't remember, but it's not something gratuitous like we saw in the movie.
Sure.
You're not poking somebody's eye out. So my pick this time?
Yeah, you're on your last two. You're on your 5 and 6, and then I'll get my 6, and then that's it.
Man, I'm having a hard time picking. So I want to do this other one just because it's one of the first times Obi-Wan versus Grievous, and Grievous is a big bad. He's nothing like we'd ever seen. Before this movie came out, and probably even still today, there was this massive debate about who could actually wield a lightsaber. Like you had to be a Jedi or some other Force user, right? Mm-hmm. Because we never saw Palpatine with one. We knew he was a Force user, but it was, Han Solo used one to cut open the Tauntaun on Hoth. So, it's an object, man. Get over it. You're not,
right.
Yes, I think you would, like me or you picked up a lightsaber. It's like in a controlled environment. I'm not going to go whipping that thing around because I have a higher probability of lopping my own head off than doing something useful with that thing. But is it a matter of training or is it a matter of force sensitivity? In Grievous's case, it's training,
right? And
so and just sheer brute force
and 360-degree wrists.
Yeah, 360-degree wrist. Being a cyborg, right? And so think of just the straight balls that Obi-Wan has to drop down in there. Hello there, the ultimate meme of Star Wars memes.
Right.
And then just confront. Because it's a decapitation strike. He's there amongst this whole contingent of droid army, and here's Grievous. We're going to end this right here.
Right.
And he does.
Yeah, and it's in the larger scheme of the Clone War. This is it. Obi-Wan knows he's been sent on a mission to end the Separatist threat. This is his chance, and that's a Jedi putting himself putting everyone else above himself. It's Obi-Wan once again being the penultimate or being the ultimate Jedi.
Yeah, and think of the threat assessment here that he didn't know of. This dude detaches his arms and whips out 4 lightsabers. Like, if I were fencing across from somebody and they had these arms like Dr. Octopus come out and have 4 other little swords there, I'd be like, all right, you win. Bye. I'm out. It's impossible. But not to a Jedi.
Right. Nope.
It's
Exactly.
cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. All right, last pick for you. Pick 6.
This one I want to pick because I feel like it's so out of left field, and there's a lot more left to be explained about this character, and it's Ahsoka versus Baylan on Cetos. And so Baylan had this. He had this. I think scroll back and look at our catalog and listen to these episodes. We remarked a lot on this lightsaber fight. He had this different fighting style, and I'm not going to say I'm not authoritative like I think Cy Darrow, one of our guest hosts, would be on some of these lightsaber styles
Forms
and this
and stuff. Yeah.
But his lightsaber reminded me of like a glaive style of fighting, like some sort of Celtic this or that. It was a bigger
Claymore.
Claymore. And the way he swung it, the way he moved it at Ahsoka, conversed with Ahsoka's samurai style. It was put to screen that they were these two opposing forces, not just on the maybe dark side, not good side, and ultimate purity of light side versus this not so good guy, but also these two fighting styles. There were lots of close-ups on the sabers of Ahsoka having these dual katana type things and this big claymore type sword.
Right.
And so it's just having that extra built in to that lightsaber fight, as brief as it was and kind of inconsequential, or maybe it was consequential. It sent Ahsoka back into that world between worlds. But and we didn't, I don't remember, did we even get a final confrontation between Baylan and Ahsoka?
Yeah, and it's totally half-baked, though. And it's not even, it's meant to be half-baked. Obviously, nobody knew that Ray Stevenson was going to pass away. It's on Peridia, and they engage for a moment, and then, Baylan
so there is no final
done.
confrontation, at least, maybe not ever, but as far as we're still waiting for this.
Right,
But
right.
Ahsoka got just dunked in this fight.
Yes.
And so she's going to overcome that. And I think the implications of this fight are really fun. But again, I'm having a hard time. There's a lot of fights. And as far as, we're picking stuff out, and I can't pick the stuff that you picked.
Right.
So, and again, I'm fine with that. That's going to be my last pick.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great pick. I think that's a great last pick. For my last pick, I'm going to go get my second animated choice. And I'm going to do one that's off the wall. And so this other one, I'm going to say the one I'm not going to do first, which will get mentioned in honorable mentions and will have people upset with us that this didn't make either of our lists. And I'm just going to hope that my explanation for why I choose the other one will make more sense. Because again, this is all subjective. The one I'm not going to pick, and the one that's just going to have to sit in honorable mention, is Ahsoka versus Darth Maul on Mandalore.
Yeah,
that's kind of flagging. It's been flagging me down the whole time. Every time I scroll to the list, I'm like, oh man, I could really pick that one. That's super strong. That's a really good one. But the one I'm going to pick instead, I think has, I don't want to say more weight than that fight, but actually I do. I do want to say more. It's to the galaxy, almost certainly more weight than that fight. Yaddle versus Dooku is going to be my sixth pick.
Because that's her ending.
Because no, yeah. So that's
a factor.
So it is Yaddle's ending. She's not a major character. This is the first time she ever had spoken lines. But seeing her sacrifice herself, seeing the pain that she had with Dooku in that, and just before that, a couple scenes before that in the same episode, she is basically being the most compassionate member of the council to Dooku and understands his feelings. But really, what that fight comes down to for me is Dooku's my favorite Sith Lord. Above Sidious, above Darth Vader, I like Darth Tyrannus more than I like any other Sith. I like Dooku's reason that he fell. I think he's a very compelling character. I love that the Tales of the Jedi gave him a real good, meaningful story, because a lot of times in the Clone Wars, and by necessity of the Clone Wars, he kind of had to be a Skeletor-style villain where he's just evil, he's just bad guy. And they didn't really start fleshing him out until the later seasons. And so this one episode does more legwork for the character of Count Dooku than any other piece of media, even Attack of the Clones.
Right.
And so,
you have to read books.
Yeah, exactly. And so seeing Dooku's fall in this moment, and his willingness to kill Yaddle, his willingness to supports Sidious because of what he perceives as loftier goals, because of what he perceives as being the right thing to do, is really, really interesting to me. You know, he still wields the blue lightsaber at that point. He hasn't bled some crystal yet. Presumably, he bleeds Yaddle's. Presumably, Dooku's red crystal is a bled Yaddle crystal. We see the symbolism where Yaddle lifts the door up and the light flashes on Dooku for a final moment before he ends the fight. And we get to see Sidious at play in the background, where we get to see early Darth Sidious. Pretty much the earliest Darth Sidious we have. I guess not the earliest, because this happens alongside the Phantom Menace, but around the same time Darth Sidious, and he exercising his will over Count Dooku, and him interplaying with Yaddle to not reveal his face, to not reveal who he is and what's going on here. Yep. So that fight for me, I recognize that it is out of left field, but that one for me is definitely it. Or that one is a strong pick for me personally.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. There was a brutal fight too. That door being dropped on Yaddle.
Yeah.
I think we both remarked at the time. We're like, how in the world?
Yeah.
Did she survive that?
Yes, exactly.
But
yeah.
Yaddle, she's tiny and very powerful.
Right, she fit between the little gears. Yeah. So that's my last pick. That's my last animated pick and the 6th pick of the list. So let's just run through our list real quick. I'll run through mine and then you run through yours. So I got Duel of the Fates in spot number 1, Duel on Death Star 2 in spot number 2, Duel on Mustafar in spot number 3, Ahsoka versus Vader in Rebels, spot number 4, Kylo and Rey versus Praetorian Guards in spot number 5, and Yaddle versus Dooku in spot number 6.
That's a good list.
Mm-hmm.
Mine starts with the Bestman duel. No, I am your father.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 for me. Duel in the Chancellor's office. I just like that spin that Sidious does.
Yeah.
When he starts off.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Iconic.
Yeah. Obi-Wan versus Maul in the Rebels cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this and you haven't watched that cartoon, go find there's lots of lists that you can Google the list of just the Maul episodes.
Yeah.
You need to do this after you watch the Clone Wars episodes that that Maul is in, because his whole arc is exceptionally good.
But you need
the best episodes.
You just need to watch Rebels. I mean, it is my favorite non-George Lucas Star Wars. I've said that time and time again, and I think that it is far and away one of the best pieces of Star Wars ever made. And I think it's better than the Clone Wars. A lot of people disagree with that. Some people agree with that. Like, Rebels kind of had, right before Ahsoka, this big renaissance of a lot of people being like, Rebels is really good, because it is really good.
Yeah.
There's a difference between watching an anthology show versus watching a series that is chronological, and Rebels chronology really lends to a great story.
Yeah, you got to give it past the first season for sure.
Oh yeah, you have to. Yeah, you got to get to season 2.
Yep. Next is Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda versus Dooku on Geonosis, and then Obi-Wan and Grievous. And lastly, Ahsoka versus Balin on Cetos.
Yeah, nope, that's a strong list too. That's a very strong list too. 3 of yours have Obi-Wan in them, which is interesting. I've been looking at the list to try and just kind of glean some things. Like, 1, obviously the sequel or the prequels are outsized mentioned in here. You have 3 prequels. I have 2 prequels on there. And so 5 out of 12 is a huge number. But they deserve the spots, obviously. There's the top 4, the top 3 on my list and the top 2 on your list are all George Lucas duels. Yeah. We didn't get to a non-George Lucas duel until your 3rd pick, which I also think is just well deserved. I think that has there's a reason that exists.
Right.
Yeah, those are, and then you have a lot of Obi-Wans on yours.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why. Well, I've got I guess 2 Obi-Wans. I've got 2 Obi-Wans. I've got 2 Anakins. No, I've got 3 Anakins. And really, actually, I have 3 Vaders. I have 3 Vader fights on mine. I've got Ahsoka versus Vader, Obi-Wan versus Vader on Mustafar, and then Luke versus Vader on the Death Star 2.
Yep. Good.
So, yeah. Good lists. But let's do some honorable mentions. Let's just talk. Let's just go through them chronologically and pick out ones that we should talk about. And I say the first 2 that we have to talk about, well, chronologically it's the first 2, is we did this list based on not just quality of choreography. We did this on a lot of nostalgia. A big part of it is we did it on how it impacts the plot and how it impacts Star Wars. And so I don't want to say that the Acolyte lightsaber fights are bad, because they're not. They just aren't, like, they're not bad. They're good. They're good fights. But on the category of plot impactfulness, they only impact the show. I mean, they don't impact anything outside of the show. Whereas some of these other duels on our lists are galaxy-defining duels.
Right.
And so I want to honorable mention both of the Acolyte lightsaber fights, that they're really cool and really good choreography. But that's
we're
why
going
they
to
didn't
get
make
some
the list.
years on, and maybe this does have some sort of at the time galaxy impact. It's too early to know. It doesn't feel that way.
Right, exactly.
But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, you get the Stranger in the Forest. That there's just no way that has a galaxy-defining impact, but it's an awesome fight.
We'd have known.
Yeah,
because what's her name? Ro would have. She would have done something different.
May or Osha.
No, May or them two. But I'm talking about the green girl.
Vernestra Ro. Sorry, Vernestra Ro. Yeah. Sorry.
She hit everything. Nobody knows about. Like Soul is a footnote somewhere in some Jedi who ultimately was a negative impact.
Yeah, I'm curious too. This just came to my mind. This is pretty unrelated to this, but now it's a question that's floating around. Is they have those busts of the Lost 20 in the Jedi Library, which are the 20 Jedi Masters that had left the Order. I wonder if they would consider Soul as having left the Order, and if he's one of those busts or not. I mean, Dooku's one of them. Dooku's one of them during Attack of the Clones. He has a bust in there because he's one of the Lost 20. So before that, it'd be the Lost 19. I wonder if Soul was part of the Lost 19.
Could be.
Yeah. So we keep rolling through chronologically. Yoda versus Sidious. Super cool in the Senate chamber.
Yeah.
I mean, that one is a really neat fight.
Well, it's a Clash of Titans, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, you get to see these two powerhouses. The emotion behind Obi-Wan and Anakin really steal the show for Revenge of the Sith. But like you said, Clash of the Titans is a big deal.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, it's like this is like the confirmation. I mean, because Sidious was waiting for that to happen, kind of, right? He was waiting for somebody to show up. And it had to be Yoda. And he murked those guards right at the start, and then it advances to where it does. And then once Yoda doesn't beat Sidious, he has a mandate at that point.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Two back-to-back that matter that didn't make the list, Obi-Wan versus Vader and Obi-Wan versus Vader. The one from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, the ultimate fight in that series, and then the one on the first Death Star. For the one that's from the series, big emotional impact in that fight, but little to no galactic impact. Not the greatest choreography, not worse, not bad either. It's just there's better choreography all over this list. And then no galactic impact in any way. I mean, I guess if Obi-Wan had lost, massive galactic impact, but Obi-Wan won. And it's on, again, we complain about this all the time. It's on some unnamed moon. We still don't know where this fight takes place. I have in our notes, unnamed moon or something.
And a lot of this fight, gosh, it had with one of the other fights I mentioned. It was the fight on Geonosis. That lightsaber fight was buttressed by that whole big cinematic. We had a whole buffet of meal to get through. That was the cherry on top of the sundae. This thing, this was the $2.99 buffet, man.
Yeah.
And the dessert didn't look good at the end.
Yeah, we've said
it was a welcome treat.
Right.
But we're glad to get out of there once we finished it.
Yeah, we've said plenty on the Obi-Wan series, which I've gone back and rewatched every Star Wars series a few months after it's come out. So I haven't rewatched The Acolyte yet, which I do think is going to improve on a rewatch. Pretty much they always improve on a rewatch, except for Obi-Wan. That one was worse on a rewatch.
I haven't done that. I need to. I know we talked highly about it at the time, but I'm kind of like scared to go back and listen to those episodes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think those are not gonna look favorably upon us. The other one, Obi-Wan versus Vader on the Death Star. We already talked about that one. You made great points about that one. In why it doesn't make a list, but it is the first lightsaber fight. I mean, it earns a place of honor for being the first.
It's literally a lightsaber fight, but there's a tone difference there of like Obi-Wan is expressly not expecting to win there. He turned the tractor beam off. He knew there was going to be a confrontation there. I think before they even landed on the Death Star, and this, I don't think this is what literally happened, but in a sense, it's like, maybe to a Jedi, they can sense a continuity of that their life is going to continue. Maybe Obi-Wan at this point didn't sense that continuity of his life after this Death Star.
There's like, Yoda who's the best at divining the future of a Jedi. He talks about how, there's a lot of different things you can see. But I think at that moment, Obi-Wan kind of saw only one path forward. A little Doctor Strange cliche, but really, I think he saw there was not another way off this Death Star for Luke and Leia. So let's keep rolling through the list. You got any other Ahsoka fights that you want to put into the honorable mention? Well, there is one we've got to mention. Ahsoka versus Vader, World Between Worlds.
Yeah. Well, that was on your list, right?
No, Ahsoka versus Vader, Rebels was the one
World
on my
Between
list.
Worlds. That's right. Sorry. There's a lot of them, man.
Yeah, there are. Oh, this list, people should just see this list that's typed out. I mean, it's 2 pages. It's a page and a half long.
I mean, I guess we'll get to it. The honorable mention that I want to, for my last one
we'll get to it. I know exactly which one you're going to talk about, but we'll get to it. We're going through the list. But Ahsoka versus Vader, World Between Worlds. That one's a cool fight. I mean, and a lot of people, including us, when it first came out, lapped it up. Because it's really good. But that one's another one that suffers from the Ahsoka syndrome of pretty much none of the lightsaber fights except for her versus Balin have the best choreography in the world.
Yeah.
And we also know that for budgeting constraints, as well as, again, all of these fights looked like a dream sequence with the mist and the smoke. They would have still done them with better CGI if they had the budget for it. They didn't have the budget. Yeah. And that lends to that. I mean, I get that it's a dream sequence and it's, all trippy or whatever. It's still just a bunch of clouds in different colors. Like that draws a lot away from that fight for me. But the shifts between Anakin and Vader right there are really, really cool. And I think that's all of the emotional impact is really great. And I don't think that the full emotional impact of that fight has yet to be realized.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we need to go back and watch that for sure.
Another one that I want to add to the honorable mention: Rey versus Kylo on Death Star 2 because of the emotional impact of Kylo.
It turns him to the light side.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, that one is super important. It's basically the original Death Star 2 fight. It's got a really good set piece. I mean, that crashing ocean behind them. And Kylo, he's going to die. The only thing that saves him is Leia giving her life so he can live and Rey healing him. He was going to die. Rey stabbed him right through the stomach. Apparently the part of the stomach that kills you, not the part of the stomach that doesn't kill you.
Live from, good fight. Again, this one, this is kind of poo-pooed a little bit, but you need to read the book Shadows of the Sith. Is that?
By Adam Christopher.
Adam Christopher, and it changes the tone of this whole thing completely. A lot of people are like, the dagger this, the dagger that, but it's this Indiana Jones in space type thing that the book turns on its head and makes it into this really fun adventure. And the set piece, man, that just makes it so much.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So we're to the animated list now. Ahsoka versus
Maul. The one I want to mention as my my main honorable mention, and I think it's almost interchangeable with my last one. I had a real hard time deciding on this. It was Rey and Kylo versus Palpatine.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right.
It was, you had the voices at the end. Kylo gave his life for Rey. Palpatine was extinguished, hopefully.
Right.
And again, the whole set piece and the events going along, the fleet that shows up at the end, them almost dying is really cool. Because Palpatine is such this evil force. He's also, the commanders he employed were also stupid and didn't put that array where someplace else. But if that fleet had gotten out of Exegol, there wouldn't be a Star Wars anymore.
Right.
They'd just gone and blown every planet up. Because it would just been a matter of time. Everybody would rebel eventually. All right, disintegrate this planet, disintegrate that planet.
Right.
All right, we rule over ashes. Have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But say what you will about the sequels, that was a cherry on top of that. Thing. People are familiar that I didn't really like The Last Jedi. People are also familiar that huge Rise of Skywalker defender. Think that's a top 5 Star Wars movie. And I'll continue to say that until they release more Star Wars movies that maybe knocks it out of the list. But for now, I love
that, and I'm happy that you mentioned that. I just glazed over that one. Now on to animateds. Ahsoka versus Maul. It was actually the first one I wrote down on the animateds because I was like, one of us is surely going to pick this. And then it ended up not getting picked. But, I mean, the choreography for that fight is kind of why I was like, we have to limit animated to 2. Because the choreography for that one is maybe the best choreography of any lightsaber fight.
It could be. And the setting is so cool. I mean, because it's at the top of the dome. It finishes on the top of the dome on Mandalore. And, the Clone Wars is where we get to learn all this stuff about Mandalore that is built upon in the Mandalorian TV show.
Yep.
And this is like the behind the scenes that nobody ever gets to see because so few people watch these cartoons. And so how it ends is cool. Maul gets captured. And Ahsoka, she was when the Order 66 happened right after this, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of like there were some scenes before this of where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka they're like, Ahsoka, you're going to go over here and do this, and I'm going to go get Grievous, and Anakin's going to go do this. And so it was like the buttressing of the scene, right? Like I've been saying over and over. And that was the final time these characters were together. Obviously Obi-Wan and Anakin had their final confrontation, but Ahsoka had, right after this episode, had this really horrible feelings of what Anakin was doing. And so there's this interlude in here that is just weaves this awesome looking tapestry.
Yeah, absolutely. Nope, you're absolutely right. I can't say any more about it. It's the fight itself. This was the one that I was like, the Yaddle and Dooku fight, I do think, has more galaxy-spanning impact. But for Ahsoka's character, for Maul's character, it's a great finale to the Clone Wars TV show. And if you're a Clone Wars diehard, there's not really anything more you could want out of the show except for this great Ahsoka rap and this great Darth Maul rap at the end.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense.
It's so easy to glaze over these things. Now that we've talked about some of these, I want to elevate some stuff.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with what I picked. I think there's some good defenses in there for what I picked. So yeah, let's go.
Well, the next one I think you're probably going to want to mention. This one I was not that surprised that it wasn't on your list, but I knew you wanted to talk about it.
Honestly, I probably kind of glazed over a little bit. This is a big list, and I'm trying to cram everything in here I want to talk about because there are lightsaber encounters that, depending on somebody could make an argument that they should be on this list, but they're not. These are a fight between combatants, and we'll talk about that after this. But so
like Obi-Wan with Ponda Baba on A New Hope. I mean, that's no fight, but that is a big lightsaber moment right there.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the first one, isn't it?
After Luke ignites in the hut.
Yeah. The first one that has contact with anybody.
Exactly.
I'm thinking of Vader's hallway scene.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, Palpatine versus Maul and Savage Opress. Man, I mean, that really was I kind of thinking. I'm going to say this again. I might want to rethink some of these things.
Right.
But again, this was like, especially at this point in time, I mean, because Maul finds his way back. Ahsoka versus Maul takes place after this. Right. And so this is Sidious taking out the trash.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And it makes for a cool, encapsulated story, but it's really just a side story. It's not galaxy impactful, except it's only impactful to Maul because Savage dies, and it sets Maul down this path of ultimate revenge. He's going to creates this crime syndicate afterward, but the fight itself is just like, I mean, because you're rooting for Maul. Up to this point, he has taken over Mandalore. He's got the Darksaber and his double-bladed saber, or maybe not. I don't remember exactly, but he's the man.
Yep.
and Sidious shows up and humbles him.
Yes,
it is
big time.
So cool.
It is cool, and like you said, you're rooting for Maul. I mean, lesser of two evils, massive evil, lesser of two evils. Though Maul is not pulling off Order 66. Like that's not Maul's not going to be able to ever do that. And so if he beats Palpatine, the Jedi still win. Maul gets his criminal enterprise in Mandalore, small price to pay for the galaxy and Anakin's soul. So that's a great fight. And I just knew, I was like, we have to talk about that one.
Yeah.
So One that I want to just mention real briefly, and I only want to mention it briefly because I'm struggling to remember all the finer points of it, but that I know I really enjoyed, is Ahsoka versus Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mortis. Because Ahsoka is possessed by the sun here, so she has like an outsized strength versus these two. I mean, she's the Padawan, and it's season 3. She's a young Padawan. She just started using her 2 lightsabers in that season, and so she like is whipping Anakin and Obi-Wan, and it's just fun. It's just neat to see. The choreography's pretty good in that one, and so it's a lot of fun. That one's a cool one.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch that. There's those episodes, Mortis, and the one where Yoda goes and finds the Force Ghost power. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the best episodes of Clone Wars.
The Yoda arc is my favorite Clone Wars arc.
Yeah.
That's my far and away my favorite Clone Wars arc. So it's also my wife's favorite Clone Wars arc for totally different reasons. I love it because I'm a junkie for the Force stuff. Like anything that deepens the lore of the Force, I'm all over. It's her favorite because Yoda is far and away her favorite character. Yeah. She loves Yoda.
Isn't that the arc where Darth Bane is made canon?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and voiced by Mark Hamill also.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's all really good stuff in that one. We only got a couple more left on the list. Obi-Wan and Asajj versus Maul and Savage. This one was probably never going to make a top 6 list. It's a good fight. It's a fun fight, too. It's a bunch of red lightsabers. It's like 5 red lightsabers, and then Obi-Wan's 1 blue lightsaber.
Poor Asajj. They teased her in Bad Batch. And
Yeah. We're going to get some eventually. We'll get her eventually.
Back.
Yeah, exactly.
I still haven't read that book where she, quote-unquote, dies. But
we'll need Dark Disciple explained. But yeah.
For that.
And then I don't know if you have any more. The last one I want to mention is Kanan versus the Temple Guards. Short fight. Happens in the temple on Lothal and is mainly just a hallucination, but is where Kanan gets knighted after he defeats the Grand Inquisitor as the Temple Guard, and it's not really a fight. I mean, it is a fight. They actually lock lightsabers, but it's more about Kanan admitting to himself that he's worthy to train Ezra, that he is a Jedi Knight, that he's worthy to be a Jedi. And so the impact for that show... That fight was really, really big, and it's just a lot of fun. It's really cool to see. Also, I think this is I'm pretty confident, actually. No. Got to be the second. This is the second time we see... No, the first time we ever see a yellow lightsaber cross blades with another lightsaber.
Cool.
We see yellow lightsabers first when Ahsoka's on trial, but they don't ever cross lightsaber blades with anything, I don't believe.
Yeah. It's, we didn't mention any comic books or books. And the only thing that pops into my mind that might be something that stands out, or it's the most prominent standout, I'm sure I'm leaving a lot off the table, is Luke versus Luke. And,
Yes. That is a great one. I mean,
I
thought you were going to say something from the Vader comics, so that totally caught me off guard.
Dude, I don't remember anything. I mean, there's where Vader, the first thing where Vader bleeds his crystal.
Mm-hmm,
but that, the Jedi in that is mostly a pacifist,
right?
And it's kind of hard to sit there and say. I mean, Vader, there was a fight, but it's like, for one, I don't remember all the details. I know Vader's a butthead in that one, but like, and I'm just struggling to think of some other big encounters, because a lot of the books take place after most after the Empire has fallen, and there's not a lot of Jedi around.
Yeah, it's not. Lightsabers are not common. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, and in just most of these, lightsabers are not common.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to sit there and dig down. And Luke versus Luke, I mean, there's 2 Force users, and the story behind that, clone from the hand found at the bottom of the Bespin and all that stuff. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Super cool. Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one. So this was a fun episode. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You got another one?
Let's just elaborate. The fights that encounter lightsabers that aren't, we briefly mentioned them,
sure.
but how impactful they are. And to me, it was the Vader hallway scene. That's just a massacre.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not a counter between like worthy combatants, and so that doesn't make the list. What's some other stuff like that?
I mean, Luke's hallway scene, and one of the more iconic ones that I can think of is Mando learning to wield the Darksaber when he's in that like meat locker and he burns his own leg and he's and it's super heavy.
Who's the guy he fights afterward? The other Mandalorian.
And when he fights Paz Vizsla.
Paz Vizsla.
Those are big. When Sabine is learning to wield the Darksaber for the first time, that one's big. There's, I mean, obviously Obi-Wan and Ponda Baba. That one is a big moment. None of these. That's the thing is, I don't feel like any of the non-lightsaber clashes are as galaxy defining as we're talking about. I mean, the whole Geonosis arena. That's not a lightsaber fight.
It's a lightsaber battle.
Yes, exactly. That's a battle. And so that one's a really good one too.
And those are just so rare.
Obi-Wan versus Jango on Camino. Yep. We get a lot of Attack of the Clones lightsaber use against not other lightsabers
that are competent combatants, but it doesn't fit the bill for what we're talking about.
Right.
Very fun fights. Very cool.
Han versus the Tauntaun on Hoth.
Yeah. Are you talking about that one? But that's why those aren't on the list. Mm-hmm. As cool as those are, as far as rating scenes, that Vader hallway scene, the Luke hallway scene, man. And I've told this story before. A friend of mine was over for dinner when that came out. It was such a pivotal moment of that TV show, and that friend passed away. And so it's a very it's a memory very near and dear to my heart.
Right.
And it's such a cool thing.
Yeah. It absolutely is.
Is very fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of really good non-combatant lightsaber fights for sure. So that was a fun episode. This was a great meat to the podcast right here. This was a lot of fun to talk about. We really hope you guys will go comment on YouTube, DM us on Instagram, get a hold of us and tell us who you think has the stronger list of the 6 of our lists, or of the 2 of our lists. Who has the stronger 6 fights? Yeah. So go let us know, and let us know what your 6 picks are. Let us know what your top 6 lightsaber picks are, because we'd really like to know. I'm sure we missed some. Like I said, people are going to be coming after us for not putting Ahsoka versus Maul on there. I already know. People that listen to this podcast that are our friends are going to be coming after us for not listing that one.
Days.
Yeah, exactly. So that ends our meat of our podcast, but there's a lot more podcasts to go. So we're going to now hop into the How the Force Works segment.
That's not how the Force works.
All right, Colin, so the How the Force Works segment for any of our new listeners is where one of our Patreon subscribers heads on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and submits a question, and we answer it here on the show. You can start submitting a question at the $1 tier, so any Patreon subscriber is eligible to ask this question. But this question comes from Patreon subscriber Loaf, and he asks, what is, in your opinion, the best underworld-centric piece of Star Wars media?
I think the best answer is the Dr. Aphra comic.
Oh, yeah, that is a good answer. That's a very good answer.
And so it's quite expansive. It's Indiana Jones in space. I think the character is compelling. I didn't know anything about it. I was buying the Darth Vader comic, and her comic originated from that. She was a helper for Darth Vader.
Right.
And so she spawned out of that. There's some really epic storylines. So I haven't read them all. I need to catch up. Comic books are hard for me. I can't stand just the drip, drip, drip week by week or month by month.
Oh, yeah. I only do omnibuses and trade paperbacks anymore.
And so there's the Eternal Rur. She finds this crystal that has an intelligence in it and ends up in the bottom of the Jedi Temple. And just a whole, the bottom of the Jedi Temple, because that's where Palpatine stores all his stuff that he loots now.
Right.
And there's just so much to it. And her adventures going on. She's got these droids that she liberates, 000 and BT-1. They're these assassin battle droids. There's nothing else like them in Star Wars except in this comic. And there's just so much cool stuff to it.
Yeah.
It really is cool. And I got to say, this question is kind of premature. This needs to be asked next month because it could change to the video game Outlaws.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that may have been what spurred this question.
It could be. Yeah. So we'll see. We're going to play that game on stream. I'm excited to try it. I've seen some gameplay.
I just got the pre-order. I got the gold edition, so I'll be getting the Jabba the Hutt mission early.
Oh, cool.
And I get 3-day early access. So
there you go.
I'm going to be hopping on as soon as possible.
There's a lot of games about to come out.
Yeah.
That game... World of Warcraft is releasing their expansion. Space Marine 2 is coming out.
2 is going to be a grind. I can't wait. It's going to be tough. I think Space Marine 2 and Outlaws come out like within days of each other.
Yeah, dude. I don't and both of those sorry. My mind is so full of stuff I have to do. I'm going on a trip next week. That Space Marine 2 game will be able to beat in a finite amount of time. That's not extensive.
Yeah.
That Outlaws game is not that way.
Right, it's different.
There's going to be, for all we know, and I'm trying to not read a bunch. There's so much talk on the internet about how these games plays and how some decisions made about them that I really don't want to spoil the richness of what this game could be. I want to discover that for myself and make my own decisions. So, given that, I don't know much about the game and how it plays. I know you can travel to 5 different planets. I've seen some people driving speeders around, but like, how customizable is what the character's going to wear? How are you going to be? Are you going to be able to just grow through and blast through and kill a bunch of stuff? Or are you going to be sneaky and do all these other things? Like, you get to customize a starship. I really like those elements of a game, and I'm looking forward to it. And but more importantly, to the context of this question is like, we get to build our own empire. Are we just going to exist in the Star Wars galaxy? All this other stuff. I'm super curious to see how that goes. Right.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really, really interesting. My answer to this question, I'm happy you didn't say this one, because this one was just like, this one was playing as a like siren in my mind, where it was basically blocking out all the other ones, and I was like, this one has to be it. And it's Solo, a Star Wars story.
Yeah, that probably is the best, and I didn't want to steal that from you.
Well,
I didn't know if that was what you're going to pick.
Yeah, that one is.
That's a really good one, but let's go with something. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know, but I'm on a roll. That Dr. Aphra is a lot more expansive. That Solo is just one movie.
Sure. But Solo, I mean, it's elements that it lends to the Star Wars underworld. It is the piece of underworld-centric media. I mean, it's it. That is the whole movie is just underworld. I'm surprised, Andor's the only piece of Star Wars that doesn't have a lightsaber in it, and that one was just almost there. It was very close to being the only piece, because you only get a flash of a lightsaber in it. Right. But the whole show, just, you get the big adventure, you get the heist, you get the gambling, you get the smuggling, you get the Kessel Run, you get Kessel itself. Right. There's just so many elements that are so important to how you define Star Wars underworld that I think that movie takes the cake for the Star Wars underworld.
It really does. Yeah.
So anyways, we appreciate the question, Loaf. We appreciate every Patreon subscriber who sends in a question. And so if you're over there on patreon.com/Star Wars Station, you're subscribing to the podcast, please don't hesitate to ask a question, and we will answer it here on the show. We've now got more podcasts to get to because we have the news segment. There's a lot of news out this week, so let's head on over to the HoloNet news.
You made the HoloNet.
All right, Colin, so our first news story of the day is about an upcoming book series that's going to release called Reign of the Empire. So there's a trilogy of books that they're going to release, and the first one is called The Mask of Fear, and it's going to be a series about the early rebellion that's taken a lot of inspiration from Andor and follows a lot of the same characters as Andor. Mon Mothma is going to be a central character. Saw Gerrera is going to be a central character. Bail Organa is going to be a central character. So it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really does. Saw Gerrera is a character I wanted to know. I've wanted to see more and know more about since his debut in Rogue One.
That's hilarious because he is like the most prolific Star Wars character, I think. I think he touches the most other media.
Well, wouldn't he show, and I could have said that wrong. Did he show up in the cartoon first or Rogue One first?
He showed up in the cartoon first, but as a major character that we understand, he shows up in Rogue One first, because he shows up in the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
obviously.
But I want to know how he got his start. I want to know why he thinks the way he does.
Yeah, well, we get a little bit of that, that's what we get in the Clone Wars. We get him becoming an insurgent in the Clone Wars, where Anakin and Obi-Wan train him to be a terrorist against the CIS. Yeah, so there's a whole arc about it, and then we get him in the Bad Batch, because we get his kickoff for fighting the Empire.
I like him. I think he's cool.
He's great. I'm excited about it. I'm just saying, and I think we need more story of him. He just shows up and he touches a lot of media. He's been in 2 episodes of the Bad Batch, like 5 episodes of the Clone Wars, 2 episodes of Rebels, Rogue One, the Fallen Order video game, and I think that's it. Other than like comic books and books that he also shows. Andor.
Yeah. And now books.
And I'm excited about this series because they're seeing the success of Andor, and they're saying we need to replicate this. We need to do this some more. And it's the first book's written by Alexander Freed, who writes the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. I've only read the first book of that trilogy. I'm on the second one, but when I say I'm on the second one, it's like I'm slowly listening to it over months. And the first one was exceptional. About dogfights and a squadron of rebellion pilots immediately after Return of the Jedi, and it is just great Star Wars.
This piece of news doesn't mention Lutheran Rail, so I hope that's not a telegraph.
I bet.
I mean, I know it is.
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
Like we know.
He's got to come up, right? I think he'll come up a little bit. All right, so our next piece of news, we got a bunch of releases from Hasbro for Star Wars action figures. San Diego Comic-Con just happened, so that's why we're getting this flood of news about like secondary media, like books and action figures and stuff like that, because that's where you debut that stuff. But we're getting Black Series figures from The Acolyte, from Andor, from The Mandalorian, from other original, from the prequels. Like they just have released a giant laundry list of action figures from different Star Wars products.
It's absolutely insane how much stuff is in here. Have you already pre-ordered your Basil action figure?
Yeah, man, I want one only because of how much we trashed his character.
I bet you can wait and pick it up at Ollie's.
Yeah, you will easily be able to get the Basil action figure at Ollie's. Some of these you are not going to be able to get. Cobb Vanth, that action figure is going to be gone. Ahsoka in her white robes, that action figure, gone. Thrawn,
I think the
gone.
armor too.
Yeah, the armor, because she comes with a playset, which is super cool. And some of these are vintage collections, some of them are Black Series. So like Cobb Vanth and the Armorer playset are going to be vintage series, which is super cool. I mean, the Cobb Vanth one looks awesome.
It's awesome.
It's got like the retro rocket pack and stuff. It looks neat. But we get Ahsoka and Thrawn in the Black Series. We're going to be getting Deidre Miro, which she's a great character. I love Andor. And I know that most of the action figure collecting market is adults. But like imagine action figures are still marketed to kids and some kid is like, I can't wait to get my hands on the Deidre Miro action figure.
Hey, there's some kid who loves Grogu and the Mandalorian is going to buy that armor set up, buy the Cobb Vanth. They're going to figure out their own crate dragon and do all the different stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So I'm excited about those action figures. They look really cool. Neither of us are major action figures collectors, but I've got a few on my shelves. Like you said, I pick them up at Ollie's when they're on sale because then I get a cool Lando to stand on my bookshelf. I've got he's my favorite action figure I own, Return of the Jedi Lando.
Yeah, I'm more of a Lego minifig. I can't wait for that alternate.
The Dark Falcon.
Yeah.
Yep. So we got one more news story. This one is nearer to us than some of the other news stories, and it's a little more niche, but it's worth talking about. Star Wars Legion, we've mentioned many times, is a board game that you play. Not really a board game, a miniatures game that you play with different Star Wars armies. You get to customize your own force and go against your friends with it.
You pick from different factions, Imperial, droids, the CIS droids,
the Rebellion,
the
Republic.
You get to play all the clone troopers, or you can play the criminal syndicate led by Maul.
Yeah, the Shadow Collective.
Shadow Collective.
Yeah, and so it's a lot of fun. They have a lot of cool minis. They've got. You can, if you play CIS like me, you can play Geonosians. You can have Grievous on the table. You can have Dooku. You can play Ewoks as the rebels.
Yeah.
Wookiees. They're the Bad Batch is there. They've just got a bunch of really cool choices. So it's a game that we both really enjoy. But they've changed it. This last week, they've launched a new rules set for the game.
Like a 2.0.
Yeah, exactly, a 2.0. And we haven't exactly gotten to dive into what that means as players and what it looks like, but it's worth talking about that all of these changes are coming in, and some of them seem pretty major. They've changed the points for the armies. They've made different units, and you can attach characters to units. Heroes have new rules. Like, there's a lot of different things.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. We haven't played in a couple months, and we should probably break it out again just for this reason alone, to see how the new game plays.
Yeah, sounds like we got to buy a new cardboard set. I don't know if you download a PDF or anything with all the new rules for the different cards.
Yes, yeah.
It's worth it to buy these extra sets. For other games, they've done it, and holding the cards in your hand, being able to tell what exactly is going on, what exactly is going on the table is important. But also, every time they bring out one of these new sets, we're all just human, and they make the rules, then they overlook some things. So it's really fun to figure out how to break the game.
Right.
And some perspectives. I guess I'm a sadistic somehow, but it gets patched. In X-Wing, you could drop bombs on people. It was oppressive.
Then there's always a motivation to sell the newest thing. And so sometimes the newest thing is always a little bit better than everything else.
Yeah.
And so for competitive players, they're out there trying to grab that one.
Yep.
But that's the news segment this week. We appreciate you guys hanging on, and we've got one more segment to go, and that is our Star Wars moment of the week.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, Colin. Inquiring minds and Darth Vader would like to know, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
Mine actually occurred on the drive over here. I was listening.
Wow.
I was listening to a video, just lawyer stuff, because that's one of my hobbies is,
He's an attorney for hobby.
Yeah. Well, no, rules lawyer, right? Not really. It's just super interesting. There's court cases in the world that I like to listen to. And one of the most interesting one, this guy put Olympic slogans on his drink that he sells. And the people who run the Olympics are suing him, and he's going to lose badly. So, and it has to do with trademarks. Well, the YouTube lawyer gave examples of what trademarks are. And everybody, if you think, like Carter has a football logo in his studio here of a team he likes. Well, that logo is trademarked. You can't go start selling your own merch with that logo on it. Everybody knows that. It's obvious. But what this lawyer told about that, sounds can be trademarked as well. And the example she gave was Darth Vader's breathing. So if you were to create a piece of media that had Darth Vader's breathing in there, Disney would probably sue your pants off. Because that sound of him breathing, that respirator breathing sound is trademarked. And so you can't make money off of that unless you're Disney or you license it from Disney.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting because you're right. There's all kinds of hoops to jump through for that kind of stuff.
And obviously for the moment of the week, it was just kind of serendipitous that example was used. But think about using some sort of like cash registers make a certain tone. Maybe you invented a point of sale system, and if you had a lightsaber clash as your little deal on there, you made an app that had lightsaber sounds in it. I bet Disney's going to go after you or something like that.
Very
interesting.
Right. No, you would absolutely have them go after you. It is that's super interesting. So my Star Wars moment of the week is a couple weeks ago, I was able to purchase at a heavy discount the Star Wars The Clone Wars board game. Our local college here sells board games, and I was able to get it when they were having a sale. This game is based off of the Pandemic board game system, which is exceptionally popular. I mean, it was #1 for many, many years on Board Game Geek. And so I've gotten to play the Clone Wars game twice. It is a ton of fun. The droids are spreading across different planets, kind of like a disease. It's the pandemic system. And then each Jedi has a different ability, and you have to work together as a team to defeat the droids and defeat specific missions that are all drawn from the Clone Wars cartoon.
Oh, cool.
Using different combinations of cards and different strategies to be able to beat these missions. And you have to manage the growing droid threat on various planets while trying to beat these missions. And there's a time tracker that the closer you get to Palpatine, the closer it gets to you losing the game. And so it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I've only played it twice now. We played Asajj the first time, which is the recommended first villain, and the medium difficulty. My wife, one of our members of our RPG, Brian, and myself, and we blitzed through it. I mean, it was no problem. So then Brian and I tackled Count Dooku on the hardest difficulty. It was sweat fest. I mean, it was down to the wire. And I think we probably actually should have lost. We were reading the rule book and we're like, oh, well, I think we were supposed to do this. And I think we were supposed to do this. But it was a lot of fun. It's a super cool game. And I would recommend that board game to anybody. Star Wars board games are always good. They make incredible board games routinely from Star Wars.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I want to play it now.
Yeah, we definitely need to. We definitely need to check it out. But that wraps up this podcast. We had a lot of fun talking lightsaber fights. There are epic lightsaber fights in that game too. But we had a lot of fun talking lightsaber fights with you guys. Again, we hope you'll send us your top 6 lightsaber fights, and let us know, what your draft list may be. And let us know who had the better draft. We had a lot of fun making this episode. We had a lot of fun talking with you guys about all these different lightsaber fights. And so if you like this content, you like the Star Wars Station, then please don't hesitate to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at starwars.station. We're on Twitter at SW_station. You can find us, there's a Discord that we have. It's at the link of this podcast. You can find us on YouTube. You may be listening to us on YouTube right now. Drop a like and a subscription if you are. We really appreciate it.
That YouTube's popping off, isn't it?
Yeah, our YouTube videos have done a lot better since we started the animation, and hopefully it'll continue to do that. And our podcast is always there on Spotify, on Apple, wherever you get podcasts. You can leave us a 5-star review there, and that helps us so much. It helps us grow. It helps us, get past the algorithm to find more listeners. And as we've mentioned a couple times on here, we've got a Twitch, and it's about to be going crazy with this Star Wars Outlaws game.
Yeah, and as far as live streaming goes, I wouldn't say mastered, because I'm always improving day to day, but daily I'm at 10 o'clock Central Time, and that's if I don't have any other work to do. I was late today. I'm doing streaming videos of painting miniatures, and basically that's an excuse to have conversations with you. If you want to talk Star Wars, I can log in a Discord. We can have a voice conversation as long as you don't mind being on the stream, want to follow the rules. But text conversations with the participants there about Warhammer, about Star Wars, anything pop culture. That Deadpool and Wolverine movie just came out. We've already had a bunch of good conversations about that off the podcast. And then, we can. The point of that was streaming to Twitch. I'm streaming to YouTube, and I'm streaming to the Warhammer Station Instagram. So Carter, we might have to figure out how to set up to where you can stream the game not only to Twitch,
I know how to do YouTube
Instagram
and Twitch.
too.
I don't know how to do Instagram. We'll have to figure that out.
Tough.
I think, I think with because I'm playing on an Xbox, I think you have to have a stream deck.
Oh, yeah. You might not be able to do that on Xbox.
For Instagram. I know you can do YouTube and Twitch easy. But
PC, it's still complicated. But it's fun to interact with people out there.
Yeah,
very
nice.
fun.
Very cool.
We're building a community. It's good.
Yeah, it's been very good. And yeah, you should definitely go check out Colin's stream, especially if you're a Warhammer fan. We also have our website, StarWarsStationPodcast.com. Please go check that out. You can find our episode backlog. You can find some products to buy. And then finally, we've got Patreon.com/StarWarsStation. We have a lot of great Patreon subscribers. We've got a lot of great rewards. We've got other podcasts on there, ARC Troopers. We've got an RPG actual play podcast over there. We've got t-shirts and stickers and way to interact with us here on our podcast, and just tons of things for you to do. And all of that starts at $1. So go check out patreon.com/StarWarsStation. And if you go check out patreon.com/StarWarsStation, you could be contributing to a lot that goes on here. We take that Patreon money, invest it back into the podcast, and we've got a way that we have been spending that Patreon money that's going to come out super soon, hopefully ahead of our 100th episode, that we're really excited about, that we think people will really enjoy. And so go and check out patreon.com/StarWarsStation and continue listening in with us, continue loving Star Wars, and continue to stay wizard.